Hello everyone and welcome back to Always Watching. Today we're discussing My Brilliant Friend, Season 4, Episode 7. Nino has finally made his way out. We wish him absolutely no luck in his future and endeavors. Sayonara, good riddance. I have never been so happy to see a man off my screen. And I have to say, the actor who plays Nino had me stressed this entire season. Like, I'm not even in this relationship. And I felt the pressure. The episode makes a number of time jumps, and I think this is to make it clear that we have now moved on from the Nino storyline. Lila and Elena are back together as one. They feel like one big family. I did enjoy watching them develop as mothers. The episode begins with the aftermath of Nino's affair. She's trying desperately to hold on to something about him, but as hard as she tries, she is just completely over him. Watching her alone again in this apartment was really sad. She goes to the bathroom and of course she can't really unsee what she saw. She looks out the window and suddenly the view is not so great. And the question is, what now? The only reason she moved to Naples was to accommodate for Nino. She never wanted to be here, and now she's stuck. While she waits to hear from Nino's raggedy behind, Antonio comes knocking on her door and he drops a bomb. Now, granted, I knew Nino was a creep. However, even in the book, the scope of his behavior did surprise me, and I do see him as a very skilled predator. Like, he is on another level. Antonio informs us that not only does he pursue women that he is friends with, he has pursued women that she is very familiar with as well, and he has no red lines. Apparently the list goes on for ages. Like, this man is just a serial predator. And I always thought it was strange that none of Nino's affairs have come back to haunt him, given the amount of women that he scorned. And the reason is he never actually leaves any woman. He just keeps adding new women to his rotation, and he tries to keep them in his life, even if he's no longer interested in them. I think he has some sort of addiction. And this addiction may not just be like a physical addiction. I think it's a mental one as well. And the idea of never letting someone go, like, there's a difference between a man just leaving you. But what Nino is doing to these women, it's kind of a torture, because he literally will string you along and like until you let him go. Because from his perspective, he will keep you forever. And Antonio explains that in some weird way, he is loyal because he never actually leaves anyone, which again is terrifying. One of the biggest revelations this episode is when Antonio informs us that the reason Lila and Nino never got back together is because he interfered. And had it not been for that interference, Lila probably would have been stuck in his honey trap for a lot longer than she was. It's really scary to think, because in Elena's case, if they knew about the affair, if Lila knew about the affair, she probably would have done something about it. Maybe Antonio would have done something about it, but she kept her affair with Nino a secret. And by the time everyone found out, it was too late. Nino had such a strong hold on her, so she was like beyond saving. But at least in Lila's case, Antonio was able to kind of step in before it got to that point. And Nino's motivations for telling her now is because, as he explains, you want the information to have the right effect. At the moment, she has fallen out of love with him, and this is something Lila clocked in the last episode, which is why she sent Antonio. And this information is the nail in the coffin. This basically destroys Nino, and at a time where Elena is not as obsessed, she's not as in love with him as she was in the past. And it is true that when you're in love, you will forgive people. And what's worse is that you will skew things to keep the fantasy going. Like, throughout the season, we see that Elena, she has an inkling that Nino is doing something. We see it with her fantasy. And she constantly tries to block it out and hold on to these empty words. But she always knew on a deep level something was wrong. I think Antonio and Lila's decision to tell her now was definitely the right one, because she's humiliated. You know, she's so embarrassed, she starts to laugh because she almost can't believe how ridiculous the situation is. And I think she also laughs because it's a relief. Like, finally, she doesn't have to block it out. Like, she can just kind of accept what she's known on some level for some time. Now, whether or not it was on this level, like Nino, again, he's on another level, but I think she can rest easy because it's like, okay, finally I can let this go. Now, the scene with Antonio and Elena really surprised me. Like, at first it was like, hold me, I'm sad, to like rip me apart. Like, it just went from 0 to 100. And I was looking at Elena, I was like, Lanu, you know, to the Lou, like, what is happening here? Like I had never seen this side of her. So watching her talk dirty to him was like, I was like, wait a minute, what is, and then the music started playing, which was so like upbeat considering the situation. And like that whole thing was, you guys let me know what you think, because I was just like, wait a minute. And I think with Antonio, she just wanted the validation. Like, now that she doesn't have Nino around, she's without a man. And I think the reason that she escaped her marriage to be with Nino, again, I really don't think it was about Nino. It just wouldn't have occurred to women to leave their husbands and try to live alone, because women have been conditioned and are still conditioned to believe that they can't really survive without a man. Like, you need male supervision to live. Like, how are you going to manage yourself? Like, there's that belief that women, if left to their own devices, will destroy themselves. And I think some part of her just thought like she needed male presence to justify leaving. Now, back to Antonio. I thought this was such a brilliant scene because it really shows how even the best of us can become vulnerable to things we never thought possible. Like, and I did like the way the scene was shot after. Like, they're sitting side by side. They're not cuddling. Like, this is not a love situation. It was just like a necessary relief. And I love how she just thanks him at the end. She's like, thank you for the distraction. He's like, you're welcome. Like, it was just there was a lot going on there. Just in that moment, Raggedy Nino calls, and he wants to see her right away to explain himself and also try to keep his hold on her. She refuses, and to make matters worse, she informs him that she slept with Antonio and hangs up the phone. And I think because she told him about Antonio, he just decides not to show up at all. Like, he clearly felt some type of way. What's surprising is that not only did he not show up the next day, he didn't show up for like a year or two. He just ghosts. He essentially just ghosts her. And Nino is really raggedy. Like, whenever he does swing around, it's like really unexpected, and he has no shame. But we will circle back to Nino in a moment. Now, until we wait for Nino's unfortunate return, Elena has no choice but to go back to her life. And this whole incident with Nino and living in this apartment, like, she doesn't really know what to do because she doesn't really have closure, and she hasn't been able to write a single thing. And these publishers want their book. So in the last episode, she promised that she would write a book in a few months, I think by the fall. And apparently this book is long overdue. But I guess everything does happen for a reason. So back in the day, she had written a manuscript. And when she tried to get it published, her mother-in-law hated the book. Lila hated the book. And thankfully, she had this manuscript lying around because she literally had nothing to send to the publisher. And at the moment, she really has no way to take care of her family. So this was like kind of a last-ditch effort. And so she sends this book called Slamming Doors, which I thought was super appropriate, given that every door has literally shut in her face in this moment. Like, this is kind of like she has nothing left to lose. And she sends the book over to the publishers, praying for the best. It's at that moment Nino's raggedy behind shows up. And the way he shows up is just so unexpected. He looked just as sleazy as ever. And he looked at his baby Emma like he almost forgot that he had a child. He's like, oh my God, I forgot that I had you. Like, he looked super surprised. And even Emma, like her daughter, did not recognize him at all, which tells me that he hasn't even tried to contact the child. Like, he went ghost on both of them. This is something that will gravely affect her in the future. Now, since Nino's much needed departure from this household, he hasn't been contributing at all. And the reason she agreed to move into this apartment is because he promised to take care of things, and it doesn't seem like he's taking care of anything. During this conversation, Nino displays no accountability. He never apologizes. Like right off the bat, he's like, you know, it's Lila that's trying to break us apart. She's like, what? Lila is not the one that forced you to seduce all these people, like, sir. He then tries to go on and throw Antonio under the bus. And I think Nino is offended that she found out, not that he committed the act. Like he just like, how can we go back to a time where you didn't know for sure I was doing those things? And he is just a despicable human being. However, he does finally admit to this compulsion that he has, this addiction to women. And he really has no self-control. And I do believe him. I do think that it is a sickness. And I think he's not someone that can stop. Like, I think he's hooked on it. And this is the type of behavior that he picked up from his father. And Elena makes the comment, like, is this an example of, like, fragile masculinity? Like, do you really need all this female attention? And I think, again, he got this from his father, because his father was also a womanizer. He was always sleeping with other, like, pretty much anyone he could. And I think he picked up on this behavior. And Nino tries everything in this conversation. He tries to explain it. He tries to throw people under the bus. And when all else fails, he tries to seduce her. And he is just a nasty human being. And something I've noticed about Nino is that he never gets jealous. Instead, he's like, listen, if you want to cheat, that's fine. Like, I'm sure you've done it before. He tries to get her down to his level. He tries to put her, like, he's like, let's use this as an opportunity to explore how low we can go. And something about Nino is he has no shame. He will turn you into something you never thought possible. Thankfully, Elena is over it. Like, the way she pushes him, he looked so weak. He looked so out of it. And I think the thought of losing her does make him sad, but not because he actually loves her, but because he doesn't like the idea of losing people. Like, he almost collects women, like, to kind of build himself up, like, to shield himself. I think he gets off on, again, like, keeping these women, like, prisoner. And Nino, by any standard, I mean, it was common during this time for people to have secret families, affairs, but I think with Nino, something I've noticed about his character is that everyone hates him. Like, every single person that has crossed his path has nothing but horrible things to say about him, regardless of class. And I think it's because of the way he conducts himself. Like, he has no shame. He's almost proud of it. Like, he's proud of it. It's very out in the open. Everyone knows what he's doing. His wife knows what he's doing. And he kind of boasts about it. And I don't think he's, like, I think by any standard, like, he's very abnormal. And the way that he moves is, like, terrifying, because he just doesn't care. After that conversation, Elena got the closure that she needed and decided it's time to get out of that apartment, and agrees to move in to Lila's apartment, specifically under her. And when Lila first proposes the idea, she doesn't want to do it. Like, the idea of living under Lila didn't really appeal to her, you know, like maybe beside or above, but under, she wasn't really down with that. But because she can't really afford this place anymore, she's gonna have to go. And I think Elena's presence in Lila's apartment is more for Lila, and this is something we will discuss, but I think having Elena there makes her feel safer. Once out of the apartment, we have closed this chapter. Like, finally, sayonara, we don't wish you well, like, good riddance. And once she's back in the neighborhood, you can see that her behavior has changed. Like, she looks a lot less disheveled. She looks like a weight has been lifted off of her. Like, finally she's alone. And I think some part of her wanted to be alone. Like, she's never had a moment to herself. And this is, like, kind of a relief. And you can see it in her writing, because she was able to finally finish that book. And it became a huge success. It was a smash. And I think she enjoyed, like, being in the spotlight again and being in a position where she could actually support her children. Finally feels proud of herself, which was nice to see. I think being alone has given her the clarity. Like, she's not comparing herself to anyone like Pietro and his work. She's not undermining herself to make a man feel better, that man being Nino. Like, she can kind of just focus on herself. Now that we're out of the neighborhood, we start to focus on Lila and Elena, specifically their relationship to their daughters. And I really felt bad for Elena's daughter, Emma, because you can see the effect Nino's absence is having on her. You can tell something is not quite right. And I think being around Tina, like when you compare the two girls, like you can see the difference right away. And with Tina, like the reason that she seems very stable and happy, and because she has two loving parents, she's not missing anything. And I think poor Emma feels very abandoned because her two older sisters, like their father is still in their lives, right? Pietro, for better or worse, he still sees his daughters. He's still in contact with them. So even though they're divorced, their daughters don't feel this abandonment. Whereas poor Emma, I think when she's comparing, like she can see that something is wrong. And you can even see it in the way that she's really attached to her mother. Like she's always wanting to be picked up and she's always kind of watching her. She doesn't like it when she leaves. Like, I think she's scared that her mom will leave her too. Emma just seems very lonely and closed off, even when she's around people. Like, she's a fantastic child actress, by the way. And I think Lila notices, but I think Elena is too busy with her book and trying to get back on her feet that maybe she doesn't appreciate like the severity of the situation. Now, without Nino, Lila and Elena essentially merge their lives together. Like they feel like one big happy family, and everything feels like really nice until the ugliness of the neighborhood rears its head. Lila's war with Marcello and Mikel is not doing that well. Like a lot has changed since we were last in the neighborhood. From what we can see, the drug trade is rampant. The brothers have actually opened a new club, according to Elena, and there are truckloads of drugs coming into the neighborhood. And it seems like the situation is very tense and very violent. We also find out that Lila no longer has control of Mikel, and this is causing her a lot of distress. And Mikel, he seems like a wild dog on a leash. Like his brother Marcello has him on a leash, but you do get the sense that if you let it go, this man is capable of anything. In this neighborhood, it's really hard to know who has the upper hand because everybody acts so tough. But based on what I saw this episode, I think the brothers are doing very well. I thought Alfonso's storyline this episode was really tragic and heartbreaking because I think in a lot of ways he mirrored the breakdown of this neighborhood and how badly things are going. What we found out in previous episodes, Lila has been using Alfonso to control Mikel, and this is taking a heavy toll on him. Alfonso, like I really feel for him because it feels like he's been used and abused by a lot of people in this neighborhood, and he's fed up. I thought the fact that neither Mikel nor Lila have any control over him really shows how unstable this neighborhood has become. And this whole like wedding scene, I mean, that was a disaster. Like what was supposed to be this moment of calm and peace and reconciliation was actually low-key like a declaration of war. I was like, what is going on here? Like it just like at first everything was chill and then it just wasn't. I think a lot of ways this wedding scene, like we slowly start to see the brothers assert themselves as the power in this neighborhood. Like they make it very clear that they are in charge, and Lila does not like that. I thought Alfonso's entrance was really shocking because neither Lila nor Mikel saw it coming. Like they didn't really know what to do with themselves. Alfonso was heartbroken because he wasn't invited. Like he's become kind of a total outsider, and he's being used, and he's really just worn out. He's tired, he's exhausted, he's angry. He's so tired of not being seen by anyone. And he's basically like, listen, you're gonna see me whether or not you want to. Like you're not gonna ignore me anymore. And I think his presence there really exposed the fragility of this neighborhood. I thought the moment of Mikel like yelling at Lila to take care of the children was shots fired because he was embarrassed by Alfonso's entrance. And you just got a sense like this whole wedding could have just exploded at any time, like guns out, guns blazing. And if you watch that scene, when Mikel talks down to Lila, Marcello looks so happy. Like, he looks at his brother like, finally, I have my evil right-hand man back. Again, I think this wedding was more of a show for power than of like some type of peace, or like, it wasn't supposed to be chill, that's for sure. Elisa informs Elena that, like, she basically tells her sister, like, see, Lila doesn't have control over her anymore. Like, things are changing. And Elena doesn't really appreciate it yet, but things are about to get like super out of control. And watching Elena try to comfort Alfonso was really sad, because she really has a lot of empathy for him and she tries to understand him. But he's just so broken at this point. Like, I thought the scene of him pulling down his pants was sad. Like, he said that he was in pain. Shortly after this wedding, Alfonso confronts Miguel in what I thought was quite, like, I thought Miguel was gonna kill him right then and there. And he basically asks, like, why didn't you invite me to the party? Like, why are you acting like you don't know me? And the level of violence Miguel inflicted on Alfonso, and the way that absolutely, like, no one stepped in to help him, particularly Lila's raggedy behind, I thought was very telling. I thought Lila's decision not to help Alfonso was absolutely horrific. This is the first time we see Lila scared. She doesn't step in to help him because she's afraid of what will happen to her. She basically throws Alfonso to the wolves. Like, you guys let me know what you think. But I was like, you're really not going to help your friend? To me, it suggests that she may, like, he was a means to an end. And now that Alfonso no longer serves his purpose in terms of controlling Miguel, she's just kind of like, well, I'm not gonna sacrifice myself. I think Alfonso is so frustrated because the only friend that he thought he had not only does nothing to protect him, is just using him as a means to an end. I thought the fact that she was holding Enzo back, like, shout out to Enzo, like, he was ready to defend him, but she was actively like holding him back, which for me shows that she was terrified. Elena catches up to him, and Alfonso, the way he drove off, I don't think we'll be seeing him again. And I think he's a very pure soul. And I think in a lot of ways, Lila helped him come out and start sort of discovering who he is. But the problem is she did that for herself. Like, she did that as a way to protect herself against the brothers. Like, nothing that she's encouraged Alfonso to do is for his benefit. And watching him just beat up, like, he's basically squeezed between two people who could care less about him. And I think even prior to Alfonso, there's a lot of clues that Lila is not in control of this neighborhood. Like, I don't know if you noticed her son Gennaro, like, he looked out of it. Like, the last time we saw him, he looked very fresh and very, like, energetic, but I feel like he's also hooked on drugs. Like, he was not looking good at that wedding. He was not looking good in the beginning of the episode. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's just aging. But I don't think she has as much control over her own family, let alone this neighborhood. Now, without Alfonso, Lila is going to need a new shield to protect herself. And that shield is Elena. And I think in a lot of ways, Lila and Nino have a lot in common. Like, Nino is very good at pulling threads and getting people to do what he wants. And Lila is doing the same. And without Alfonso, she sees Elena as a new source of protection. Elena's new book exposed the neighborhood. It was very popular and received a lot of press. And one of the articles written about her went viral in the neighborhood. I thought the photo shoot scene was really nice because she could finally enjoy being in the spotlight. She no longer has to share it with anyone. And the whole thing seemed so lovely and chill until the article came out. As great as this book was, she exposed a lot of people, and a lot of those people she's in proximity to. And I think for a long time, people have viewed Elena as neutral, like, or as a puppet of Lila's. But this article has turned her into like an independent agent in a way. Like, that scene when the brothers pulled up on her, and Miguel in particular was screaming at her, being like, how dare you expose us? Like, basically, he made it clear that neutrality is not an option. If you continue to go down this path, you're fair game. Like, that was not an empty threat. Like, they are no longer chill with her. I thought Lila's reaction to what happened to Elena was super disturbing. When Elena first sent her this manuscript, she hated it. Because what good is exposing everyone in the neighborhood if it doesn't benefit her? Now she sees a benefit to it. The book's success and Elena's fame do offer Lila like some protection, because the more attention that is away from her, the better. Elena is clearly annoyed by Lila's lack of care. She's like, what is your problem? And she's like, listen, it's not my fault that you wrote, this is not literature, girl. You wrote about real people, and now you live around these people. Mind you, the only reason that she's living there is because Lila suggested it. And Lila knew the book that Elena was working on. So she never advised her that, maybe this is not a good idea, or if you are going to write this book, maybe you shouldn't be living in this neighborhood. Instead, she was like, write the book and live here, which only puts her in danger. Elena's book is about Naples, and I believe like the violence in this neighborhood. And in one scene, she notes how all the reviews have been positive, however, like super skewed, as like a lot of the people reviewing the book have no experience with this level of violence. So the way that they're discussing it is kind of as a means to an end. And she doesn't really want to be used as a means to an end. However, the position that she's in, she may not have any control over that. Like, it definitely would be easier to control this book and this reception to this book if she wasn't in the neighborhood. Like, she's kind of in the middle of a war zone, and she's exposed everyone engaged in that war, which is not a good thing. Lila makes a comment like, an earthquake is coming, like one bigger than we have ever seen before. But the way that everyone's intertwined in this neighborhood, like, I feel like there's no way one person can go down without everyone going down. Somehow Lila has found a way, because whatever she's doing, it is connected to these brothers. And I think she desperately wants to get rid of them, but she doesn't really know how to do it without exposing herself in the process. And Elena somehow provides a way to do so. The episode ends with Elena and Lila watching TV with their daughters. And I thought this scene was so sad. Like, I think Emma asks whether or not Tina is her real daughter, because in the article, they accidentally took a picture of Tina and Elena, saying that Tina was the daughter. And I thought it was really, really raggedy that the photographer didn't use the picture with Emma. Like, I think she felt left out. And Lila tries to make up for the situation. She's like, no, we're both your moms. And I do think Lila cares about Emma a lot. And I think she's noticing things, but she doesn't know how to bring it up. Everything was going to end just fine until Nino's raggedy head, Nino, destroyer of all worlds, of all universes, rears his ugly behind on television. The fact that he was on TV talking about politics tells me he's doing very well for himself. Like, somehow this man manages to reach levels that we've never seen before. And given the ages of these girls, Nino hasn't been around. So Nino has not seen Emma since they broke up. And Emma does not recognize Nino at all. She's like, I have no idea who my father is. And I think a lot of the issue is because Elena hasn't really had a conversation. Like, her daughter is in limbo. Like, there's a difference between a father that's just out of the picture, like he's not coming back. But the problem is the door is left open for Nino to come back. Because we don't really know when he's coming back, I think it's causing her daughter a lot of stress, because it's like, okay, even if he comes back, he's just going to leave again. And I think this uncertainty is causing her daughter a lot of stress. And towards the end of the episode, you can see the eye twitch develop. And Lila notices it right away. I'm not sure Elena does, but it's definitely having a psychological impact. So overall, I thought this was an excellent episode. I think this is going to pop off. I think this is going to get crazier. Really enjoyed it. You guys let me know what you think, and until next time.